Welcome to the Adventure Story Podcast. First, let me take 20 seconds to tell you about my new book. What if we've been looking for Atlantis in the wrong place? When an archaeologist dies protecting an impossible secret, her final message sends Eden Black racing into the Sahara to find an ancient crystal encoded with the knowledge of a lost civilization. It's the power that once turned a paradise into a wasteland. From high-speed chases through Marrakesh to an underground chamber older than recorded history, Eden must face a rogue scientist determined to use the crystal to reshape the world. Last time it awakened, the Sahara was born. This time, it could end everything. The Sahara Event is the 7th in my Eden Black archaeological thriller series. Search for the Sahara Event by me, Luke Richardson, wherever you get your adventures. Right, let's get on with the episode. For decades, travellers have dreamed of finding the perfect destination. Away from tourists, unspoiled by outside forces, a place just for them. Alex Garland, in his classic novel The Beach, suggested this was in Thailand. But what if this elusive traveller's paradise isn't on a tropical shore, but hidden in plain sight in Europe? Hey, I'm Luke. I'm an author of archaeological adventure novels. I travel the world looking for stories to put into my books and to share with you right here on the Adventure Story Podcast. While the rest of Europe grows easier than ever to access, the Balkan Peninsula, where empires collide, is a place where East truly meets West. Today we're exploring this tapestry of cultures with someone who knows how to navigate its hidden wonders. Annie Sisson has spent years empowering independent travellers to discover authentic experiences. And she's here with us today to pull back the curtain on what might just be Europe's last true adventure playground. Annie, welcome to the Adventure Story Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Firstly then, and most obviously, what do we mean by the Balkans? Can you briefly sort of explain that, and if you can, go into a little bit about what's led to them being somewhat forgotten on Europe's tourist trail?
Ooh, sure. So the Balkans is that peninsula in southeastern Europe that includes the former Yugoslavian countries. We've got Slovenia and Serbia, Croatia, Bosnia, and then a little bit further down, we've got Montenegro, Albania. The peninsula includes Greece, though often when people talk about the Balkans, they don't really include Greece because it's its own thing. We have North Macedonia, Bulgaria, Romania. And so that is the region that we're talking about when we're talking about the Balkans.
Yeah, I see that. And why is that not, I know you mentioned Yugoslavia, why is that not as well known as Greece, as an example? Because they're very close, or Italy, they're very close to sort of northern Italy as well, or Croatia perhaps. Why are these countries in the middle a little bit overlooked when it comes to tourism or adventure travel?
During the Cold War, these countries were all behind the Iron Curtain. Afterwards, there was a lot of conflict as Yugoslavia fell apart. And so a lot of people in their minds think of these still as conflict heavy places. And they just, are still recovering from those times. And so there's not as much tourist infrastructure. They haven't focused so much on bringing tourism in, but I have definitely seen that changing, which is exciting. But I think that between the image we have in our minds of that area and what it's been through, that, it just tends to not be the main focus for most European travelers.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And I suppose that begins to make this part of the world or traveling here feel slightly more authentic and unpredictable and adventurous.
Oh, it certainly does, because when you show up in most of these places, Croatia has become much more of a tourist destination, but once you get outside of there, you will notice that, it feels like you're just visiting a place. This isn't a place that's been set up for you to come and view, like if you've been to Ireland or even Italy, or a lot of these places that you feel like you kind of feel like a tourist. It's set up for it. And so what I love about the Balkans is that you don't feel that. It's like visiting a small town somewhere that like, oh, people are often surprised. Why are you here? So I love that it feels very much like hidden gems off the beaten path.
Yeah, I remember that from my experiences there. But it's also not massively sort of difficult place to travel. It's not. It's not at all. It doesn't feel difficult to travel. But I suppose you do have a lot of different languages, different alphabets, different cultural practices. Sometimes even different money. How does this change your sense of adventure when traveling in that region?
Yeah, it does feel like it is a little more adventurous because, a lot of times there's border crossings between one country. Even though they're very close together, you still have to go through a border crossing, which feels like something different. And yes, the money changes and the language changes. And because you don't see all of the signs in English, and so it just feels more adventurous. Like I'm off in a part of the world that most people have never even thought about, let alone visited.
Yeah, that's true. Or not even realised existed. It's I suppose because they're all quite small countries, they don't play on the world stage in the same way that some of the big European countries do, or some of the other big countries around the world. You don't think, oh, I must go to Montenegro, because it's there, because it's the thing. What led you to visit that part of the world initially then? How did you end up there?
Gosh. Okay. I will keep this as short as possible. So, growing up, I remember seeing these places, on the TV, and not necessarily for positive reasons, right? Like conflict and that sort of thing. And then in 2015, I just decided to take this solo trip with no itinerary planned. I just had a rental car and some camping gear and decided to have a wander. Obviously I'd seen beautiful pictures of Croatia. Plitvice National Park was one of the things that kind of inspired the trip, but I didn't know where I was going to go. And as I started wandering, I would just talk to people, get their recommendations, and kind of let that generate my itinerary as I went along. And I started in Prague and just ended up heading south. And, Slovenia was my first stop, and I was absolutely blown away. It is one of the most beautiful places I have been, and I absolutely want to go back. And from that point forward, I just fell in love with the Balkans. I made my way through Croatia and Bosnia on that trip, up through Hungary, but like those were my main Balkan countries. And since then, I've been back multiple times because it was such a delightful surprise, and there's so much there now I'm a fan.
I get that. I understand that. And I think it has an attitude there of making it feel like an adventure, doesn't it? If you go to France or to Spain or to Germany, it's very easy to travel. The trains run relatively frequently. The hotels are nice. Even if you don't speak the language, the money's all the same, whatever. But there's something about what you've described that you feel like you're going into an unknown, aren't you? You're discovering things that you'd never heard of before or never realized existed before.
Yeah, and it feels, I didn't get to do this back before the internet was widely available, but it's what I imagine, backpacking through Europe in, like the 90s felt like, where there's just not as much connectivity. Things are, like you said, it's not chain hotels. We're not looking at, the frequent buses and trains, and things are still very much like, it feels like you're kind of winging it sometimes. There's a lot more to figure out, which I think is part of what makes it feel like an adventure.
Yeah, absolutely right, absolutely right. You mentioned a moment ago renting a car. Is that something you suggest for going around this region? Are there trains and buses and other such, public transport?
There are buses are the way to get around. There's some train, but not a lot. So if you don't want to drive, there are buses that connect everything. However, time functions a little bit differently in the Balkans. That, we have a schedule that is somewhat a suggestion that things may or may not actually run on time, which is fine. I actually really appreciate the laid back nature of life in the Balkans. But yes, renting a car is the best way to really get off the beaten path and see some of the things that are a little bit harder to get to on public transport.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that adds to the adventure, doesn't it? That's part of the thing. People talk about the food there being worth the journey just on its own. What should we look out for? What should we seek when we're there?
Oh my gosh. All the food. I am here for it. And what I love is that you can see the influences. Like, for example, in Bosnia and Albania, there is a heavy Turkish influence. So a lot of the food in that region is very reminiscent of what you would get in Istanbul. So just very savory. I mean, this is not the vegetarian paradise. It is very meat centric. But other parts like Romania, I found that the food was, I mean, it's amazing, but it's much reminiscent of, German or Czech. Like, it has that more heavily Eastern European influence. So, and man, the Balkans love their sweets. They have some great desserts. There will be no shortage of dessert and coffee time. But yeah, I love the variety from country to country.
I remember the coffee being particularly good. This tiny little shot of something so strong you could probably pour out the cup and it would stay in there. And yeah, you just get one sip because the rest of it's sort of silt at the bottom of the cup there.
Yes, it is. Bosnian coffee. I mean, can't beat it.
Making me want to visit again. Do you think these destinations are emerging from being off the beaten path? And how do you feel about that? And do you think there are certain places that still offer that authentic experience?
Yeah, I do think they are emerging. I have mixed feelings about that because I think they are such incredible places and I want everyone to experience them. And at the same time, I don't want to see them turn into overly commercialized, over tourist centered places, because that's what makes them so wonderful. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword. I do think, Croatia, I think, is probably the most well-known and visited at this point. It seems to me that Albania and Bosnia are still, and Bulgaria are kind of the least visited. Maybe North Macedonia I would put in there too. So those are probably still the quieter spots, but even those are kind of up and coming depending on what part of the country you want to visit.
Yeah, I suppose that's it, isn't it? If you, dependent on your taste, is perhaps Croatia is easier because of the direct flights and they're more set up for tourists. And as you say, the further you go into these places, the more difficult or the more challenging it might be.
Yeah, but you can still get off the beaten path in all of these places. There's still, even like Romania, right? Like, people go and visit Transylvania and that has become more popular. However, if you head over to like the Black Sea coast, you're not going to, you might encounter Romanian tourists or other tourists from the Balkans, but this is not where you're going to find, crews of Americans and Australians and others that you would typically encounter on the tourist trail.
Mm-hmm. In Rome or Paris or Berlin or wherever. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So this region has numerous World Heritage sites that don't really get the attention of other European landmarks. I remember going to Butrint in Albania and it felt like, I write adventure novels, but it felt like I was one of those characters. We were in this Roman amphitheatre, the only people in this Roman amphitheatre. And it was just incredible. You know, I've been to the Colosseum in Rome and various other Roman sites around Europe. And I think this one was the most exciting for that specific reason, just being alone in this place, listening to the birds in the trees in this historical place, as the Romans would have done 2,000 or whatever, however long ago. Which ones do you find impressive or meaningful, or are there any that you specifically think people should visit whilst there?
Oh man, you're right. There are so many. There's one in Romania that is very similar to what you're talking about. I believe it's called Istria, but it is, I mean, my husband and I, it was a very long journey on a dirt road that was very bumpy, and we got there and it was us and some local school children, but it was the same thing. It was Roman ruins that you can, wander through and imagine what this was like. One of my favorites in Albania was Apollonia, I believe. I did not look up all of these before we got on the call. But it's that same thing. It was a thriving Roman city, and an earthquake changed the way the river flows, and therefore, the city kind of died up and dissipated because of this landscape change. But I mean, there are so many still intact things you can visit. And then if you're looking, that's just like historical ruins. I mean, I believe the old walled city of Dubrovnik, the whole thing is a UNESCO heritage site, which is absolutely incredible. Very well maintained. If you want to see, it's one thing to walk through ruins and try and imagine what it was like, but Dubrovnik, you can walk through it and you don't have to imagine. It's really still very much looks like it did then. And then some of the nature spots, like I said, Plitvice is one of my absolute highlight, most beautiful places I've ever visited. And then here's one for my fellow bird nerds out there. The Danube Delta on the coast of Romania is the world's largest reed bed. This is where the Danube River empties into the Black Sea. And it is just a wonderland of, wildlife and nature that I don't ever get to see anything like that where I live. So there's the historical ones, but then there's also these incredible nature places. And you can imagine what it would be like to be, the first person going through this place. So there's definitely that sense of adventure.
I feel that and have experienced that during my visits there, for sure. So for someone planning their first Balkan adventure, what 3 countries would you recommend? And how would you combine them as an introduction to this region?
Oh, that's like the hardest question ever.
I know. That's why I've saved it till the end.
I have a very special place in my heart for Bosnia. So I would absolutely make that a center point. Sarajevo, particularly, I love. And Croatia is, if one loves the sea, there is, Croatia, that whole coast, it's easy to make into a trip. Croatia, Montenegro, Albania. I personally, if you are a nature lover, Slovenia, 100% all day. And, it's as far as like combining these things together, it's really about how much time you have, because getting from one place to another, even if you're driving, these are not super highways. You are driving on 2-lane roads for most of the time. So if you've got time, you can string them together pretty easily. If you are limited on time, a great introduction. Croatia is a great place to get a little taste, and it's easy to get to Sarajevo from there. And then, you've also got Belgrade in Serbia. Those could be some good introductions. It's hard because that's just former Yugoslavia. Once you get a little bit further east, things change a bit. So I would say another good introduction would be like Romania, Bulgaria, and you could easily loop in Serbia or Bosnia in there too.
Interesting. You mentioned Sarajevo a couple of times there, and is a magical place, isn't it? There's something very special about Sarajevo.
There is something very special about Sarajevo. Yeah, I ended up there for longer than anticipated on my first trip, thanks to a travel mishap, because that's a thing that happens. And absolutely fell in love with it. And the people are absolutely amazing. And what I always say about Sarajevo is that's where I need to go. That's where I go when I need to remember how to live and what's really important, and just the pace of life, the priorities, and yeah, it is a magical place.
What is it specifically? Can you describe why it's magical? I know, but I'm interested to someone who's not been there. What is it that makes it so intriguing? I just remember, I'll share my experience whilst you're thinking. I just remember walking out to that square in the middle, and there's this old drinking fountain that's done in a very sort of Islamic style. And behind that, you've got the hills where the ski slopes were. And you've just got on the outside of this very big city, these forest-covered hills and the fresh air coming in. It just has something very magical about the contrast of the architecture, the craziness of the town, and the countryside so very close. I know nearby you've got the more modern area of the town, which is a bit more sort of concrete jungle, but in that old town, it feels very sort of medieval, doesn't it?
It does. And I think that's part of what's magical is there's, this, like the old town it feels like you're walking through what I imagine Istanbul was like 500 years ago or something. Like it's still has that very small, very authentic feeling. And then there's this just clear line, like you cross this street and all of a sudden it feels like you're in, Austria, Hungary. It's, the remnants of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Like you just cross the street and it's a totally different experience of the architecture. And then I love the blend of, like, you see minarets, it's a primarily Muslim culture, but it's where all of these things were blended. So you see the Catholic Church, you see the synagogues, you see, the Orthodox cathedrals, like all here together. And I think what makes it so magical is just how what I really expected was the opposite of what I experienced. I expected this place that has been, this was the hardest hit during the fall of Yugoslavia. And I really expected people to be very wary of outsiders and very, kind of standoffish, and which would, I don't know, I feel like that would be really understandable. And it was the exact opposite. Everyone was so warm, so welcoming, and they really appreciate the little things of just getting to sit down and have a coffee with friends. And people just it's not the rat race. You're not in a hurry. And yes, it's in this steep valley, just covered in trees. And so you look around, and my favorite, honestly, is at the call to prayer time. You can hear the echoes off of the hills. And so especially if you're walking down the street, you're just bombarded with these beautiful voices coming from 1,000 places. And it just is, it's magic.
Yeah, so exciting. Giving some chills there, thinking about it and remembering my experience there too. So I ask everyone on the podcast this question. Looking back, what adventure stories, whether books or movies or legends or even something that a grandparent or older relative told you, sparked your fascination and your want to go and see the world?
Well, it's maybe not a typical adventure story in a book form, but for me, it was National Geographic. My grandfather used to buy us a subscription every year for Christmas. And that was the adventure story. I mean, even before I could read, flipping through and looking at the pictures of these far off places and people who looked so different from me, whose landscapes looked so different from anything that I've ever seen. That was really the first spark of, oh yeah, I want to go adventure. I want to see what else is out there.
that want to see what else is out there. I think you've just sort of summarised it beautifully. Annie, then, where can people find you, and how can you help people discover this part of the world as well? Because I know you help people plan trips like this.
I do help people plan trips, along with a whole bunch of other things, which I have wrangled into one place. So my website is explorerannie.com. So that is all of the things. And as far as helping people, I love to help, whether it's, I do 1 hour consultations. I've had lots of people want to pick my brain for an hour, tell me how to get around, tell me about this place, what to see, other things I do. From that all the way to, I will help you craft your itinerary, figure out timelines, put all the pieces in place. This is not typical travel agent style. This is very much adventure, off the beaten path. You're going not with a tour group, but you want to do this on your own. And I love just helping people put it together, make it feel possible, and then go do the thing.
That's wonderful. That sounds great.
Thank you.
This is the Adventure Story Podcast. Thank you so much for hanging out today. It's been great to spend some time with you. Now, if you enjoyed Annie and I talking about her trips to the Balkans, I actually recorded a podcast episode on a different podcast about my trip to Albania, which I talk about in this interview, in 2022. If you're interested to hear my adventure there, check out the 11 Days in Albania episode on the Travel Now podcast. As always, links will be in the show notes. If you've enjoyed the show today, please subscribe, please like, and please share. It'll take you just seconds, but really helps me spread the word about this show. If you have a story you'd like me to explore, let me know in the comments or via email, hello@lukerichardsonauthor.com. And if you need more adventure in your life, and let's be honest, who doesn't? You might like to join the Adventure Society. This weekly newsletter is your ticket to travel with me, to share real-world adventures, and find out first when a new story or a new season of this podcast drops. lukerichardsonauthor.com/adventure society is where you need to go for all of that adventure goodness. And if you're a fan of adventure stories like the one we've talked about today, check out my books at lukerichardsonauthor.com. In fact, I haven't set a book in the Balkans. I really think I should. Such a great place to explore. Bon voyage, enjoy the adventure, and I'll see you next time.